Greetings there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I guess today is going to be my very first video as a sort of trans YouTuber slash content creator. I kind of wanted to provide a bit of sort of, how should I put it? I wanted to kind of provide a bit more so of a sort of in between to like I would say, how should I put it? I want to provide a sort of in between for content creators where I'm able to sort of explain things to maybe more so like the cis people who are more so like curious about maybe they have a trans partner, maybe their daughter is trans, maybe their son is trans or whatever. But I kind of want to provide this sort of bridge in knowledge between the sort of cis community and the trans community because these two communities are very different from each other. So I figured, in the spirit of things, why not start with why trans people do not belong in the LGBT community? So I personally believe that trans people don't particularly belong in this community because, like, say for example, let's say there's like a trans girl who transitions at like 13 and she's straight and like before puberty sets in or whatever and she passes perfectly and like she's straight, she's not really going to have a whole lot in common with your average gay person, lesbian person, or bisexual person. That's just simply how it is because for all intents and purposes, this girl is going to be basically a straight woman. But the reason why trans people are included in the LGBT community is because we're all sexual minorities relative to, say, cis people. And so it's this sort of alliance that shows up. It's the same reason, oh, I'm sorry, it's the same reason why trans people are sort of put in the same sort of category as like drag queens and cross dressers. Whenever, honestly, if the communities were a bit bigger and like had enough people to actually have these sort of divisions versus, zero subscriber YouTubers explaining it, they would probably be considered completely different communities from each other as they really have no relation to each other aside from the occasional gender bending antics. But again, it's this sort of baseline of if you have like this very young person who, doesn't have any secondary sex characteristics of their birth gender, it's going to be they don't have really any sort of relation whatsoever to these other communities. And so I feel like the main reason why trans people are thrown in with these other communities is it's because of the fact that it's because of political power. And I know, classic, conspiracy, whatever, like, oh, trans people are controlling uh, the White House or whatever government position it is this time, but there is some merit to the idea. Not in the way that they think, though. So basically, what it is there's strength in numbers. And so these sorts of communities of like trans people and gay people and lesbians and like cross dressers and drag queens, they all sort of come together because they're all sort of like the general rule is if we're getting the camps, they're kind of going to get the camps too. They're going to get on, the party bus. And so it's this sort of idea of solidarity between these groups that sort of allowed us to get rights in the first place, which is why we're sort of aligned with each other. But the thing is a lot of these alliances I consider to be slightly outdated. Of course, there's been a whole lot more attacks on trans people as of lately, so it's becoming more relevant. But I feel as of, say, the 2010s or so, whenever there wasn't quite so much targeting on trans people, I feel like a lot of it kind of showed through that, like, the gay community and the trans community aren't really related to each other, which is why you get so many lesbian turfs, because these two communities just they don't have anything in common, and so there's just this friction there of like, what do they have to do with each other? And so then they start fighting with each other and stuff like that. And I feel like it would honestly be for the best if trans people were able to have our own community. And I mean, there kind of is like, there's definitely a very different feel to like a trans community versus any other sort of LGBT community. It's definitely a different feel. You're a lot of a lot of other LGBT communities are more so focused in, like, how should I put it? Like marriage and stuff like that. Like, just and sometimes family acceptance, but a lot less these days. While a lot of trans communities are more focused on like these less like personal things, and they're more focused around the fact that, like, there are a lot of laws that are being put in place against us, and like all sorts of and so there's all this legislation that's being put against us. And so a lot of these trans communities end up being more focused around like the common group versus the individual's problems. And so it just kind of widens the sort of gap between the trans community and the rest of the LGBT community, which is why there's this huge difference between online trans spaces and online gay spaces, for example. And so I feel like if we weren't in a world where, cishet people would lump us in with, the gays and the lesbians and blah, 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 we would probably be considered our own exclusive community. And there have been examples in the past of trans people being considered separate from gay people. I mean, like, there still are today. Was it? I heard that there was like some Middle Eastern country or whatever that was like forcefully transitioning people to make them not gay or whatever, because there's this like separation between the two. And so it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm just saying, like, I just feel like these two communities aren't really the same thing. And the only reason why they really came together was out of necessity versus an actual sort of solidarity. And so I feel like there should be a whole lot more independence from the trans movement versus from just the general LGBT movement.